What are your biggest supply chain struggles? How do we share our information? When will the supply chain issues be resolved? I am thrilled to get started on today's roundtable. Help! My supply chain is broken. And I suspect many of our panelists and many of you out there in the audience are feeling this pain right now. So I'll start with introducing my esteemed panel. Starting with myself, I'm Christine Gonzalez, and I am Senior Project Manager and Storage Tank Queen at Entech Engineering. Someone was already asking where the crown is. On the special days, I wear the crown. Also from Entech Engineering, we've got my colleague, Dale Miller. He personifies Entech's longtime focus on operators when helping our clients, and he's been with Entech for 4 years now as an operations specialist with 27 years of operations experience. I love our panels because here's the thing, it's not just Entech, it's everybody else. We love bringing in our industry friends. So returning again, I think he's been on 3 other roundtables. We've got Kevin Morley. He's Manager, Federal Relations with the American Water Works Association, or AWWA. He has 20 plus years of experience in environmental policy. We also have Steve Allgeier, the team leader with Water Security Division of EPA, and he's been there 25 years, but has 30 years of experience in the industry. Also on our panel, we've got Dean Miller. He's the owner of Miller Environmental, which specializes in operations and maintenance of water and wastewater treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, and New Jersey. And he's been there for over 40 years. And finally, Troy Dressler. He's the Director of Operations with the LB Water Service, and they serve Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. And he's been there for 22 years. So welcome to my panel. And to find out what our audience is struggling with, I'm going to throw a poll out there to the audience. So let me launch that right now. And as I mentioned several times, this roundtable is all about the audience, what they need, what their struggles are. So what are your biggest supply chain struggles? Multiple choice, if you could pick your top 2, that would be excellent. And what this lets us do is really focus on how we should direct today's conversation and solutions for you. So a bunch of different things. Some of them are actually just materials like the piping and equipment, and some of them are more overarching things such as budgets versus bidding. I know I was talking to Rob Horvat in our Pittsburgh office about that this morning, and understanding what happens when costs are way up versus what you budgeted. He actually brought up the opposite. What happens when you budget way more, you get your grants, and then the bids come in and you're $1 million low? There's $1 million you could have been doing more with, but it's just hard with the pricing now. So give the audience another 5 seconds to pick your top 2 supply chain struggles. And then we'll jump right into things with our panel here. So let me end the poll, and then I will share the results with everybody. And it looks like the number 1 thing was the equipment and replacement parts. Yep, replacement and equipment parts. And then number 2, just barely, construction and the scheduling delays too. And number 3, also very, very high, was the budgets versus the bids. Okay, excellent. And so let's get started, panel. So the number 1 thing was trying to find equipment and replacement parts. Dale, talk to me. What are you seeing out there when it comes to contractors trying to get stuff, owners trying to get stuff done, built, bid, and schedules and everything? What are you seeing as far as equipment and replacement parts? What's hard to find?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of conversation from folks that are trying to rebuild pumps, put stuff back in service that they have at the wastewater treatment plant, and they're reaching out to vendors and, I need an impeller, which sometimes an impeller takes a long time as it was, but now, instead of, let's say normally it might have been 2 months, now they're saying 8 to 10 months. So you're sitting there with a piece of equipment that's can't be used for 10 months. And that can be a scary thing, especially if you have let's just say it's a submersible pump station. You have 2 pumps in there because one's a backup. So you have one out And guess what? You got to go 10 months without a backup. Now, hopefully in 10 months, that other pump doesn't break. But if it does, you're in a world of hurt. So there's a lot of concern on, I mean, that's what I'm seeing personally from the guys I talk to, that, you know, when they're trying to repair things, they're, I hate to say ridiculous, but they're telling me, you know, I'm calling, this is ridiculous. You know, they're telling me it's 10 months to get this widget, you know, and I can't, the equipment doesn't work without it. So that's a scary thing.
What are the rest of you guys seeing out there? Troy?
I mean, I agree with Dale on the fact that, you know, it takes forever to get it in. I know we hear it from the contractors or the municipalities saying there's no way it's that long. But because when, you know, 6 months ago, and maybe it was a month or two, and now it keeps dragging out. So it's, some people don't believe it, and which makes it frustrating for everybody involved that it's happening, because, you know, we're seeing delays now on tires to everything. So it's not just one little thing. It could be, you know, things that you thought would be easily to get, like a pen, might be hard to get now.
What are the rest of you guys seeing? Dean?
Yeah, similar things with equipment, some things with chemicals, but I think it's going to challenge the operators out there to become a little bit more creative as to how they have to operate their wastewater treatment plant for 60, 90, 120 days without that widget that they can't get. How they're going to have to communicate with the regulatory agency to make them know what's going on right now with this widget that they can't find and what they may have to do. Some of these things, the operators are going, or the systems are going to actually literally have to go back to the regulatory agency and ask for, you know, special acceptance to be permitted to operate their plant that way.
Okay. So Steve, what can you tell us as far as the EPA goes? Are plants able to quickly change up stuff like that, or do they still have to go through all the normal permitting stuff? Or are there exceptions being made to either bypass permits, or I don't know, get them processed faster?
So ultimately, that's going to be up to the discretion of the state primacy agency, and we do have a close relationship with AWWA and a number of its state members. We know that every state approaches permitting, especially under emergency situations, differently. And unfortunately, there's not sort of a standard playbook. Some states are very conservative and want to go through maybe an expedited process, but still a complete process before approving a change in operations. Whereas others understand, or I don't want to say understand, may take the position that it behooves them to offer more flexibility to the water systems to keep them running seamlessly. So it does vary from state to state. Regarding the supply issues we've been tracking since the beginning of the pandemic, they've mainly been chemical shortages, water treatment chemical shortages, and I know we'll get to that later. But the one piece of equipment that's been elevated to our attention, and it is impacting multiple water and wastewater systems, is difficulty getting replacement UV bulbs for disinfection systems. We understand what the issue is, and we are, and that's all I'll say about that at the moment, but we are working it very diligently and hope to get things loosened up quickly. And I do want to assure people it's not a shortage of the equipment itself. There are enough lamps out there to meet the industry's needs, at least according to the suppliers we've worked with. But there are some difficulties and some hurdles that are essentially just slowing things up from getting into states. And that's what we're working to unclog.
Okay. Yeah, at a meeting this morning, one supplier was saying, or no, it was someone trying to get a generator. I keep hearing generators. Generators can't get them. 16 months. They order it now, they'll get it in 16 months.
So
any solutions out there for what can people do when you're looking at something like that? Dale, did you have an idea? I'm sorry, Dean?
I actually, well, I do have one idea, and specific to Pennsylvania with the WARN network, the mutual aid network. PWAWARN actually does have some generators that can be used by the members of the PWAWARN network, which is over 135 systems right at this time. And if you're not a member, please become one. Especially a small system, it pays you to do that.
Yeah, we actually had Mike Snyder from Pennsylvania Pennsylvania WARN on our last roundtable on extreme weather. So their website is www.PAWARN.org. Kevin, a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I'm glad you brought that up. WARN in general, awesome opportunity. There's really no reason not to participate in that process. But as it pertains to generators, right? There's actually this part of this backlog is way pre-pandemic, and it goes all the way back to Harvey and some of the impacts there. And
Wait,
then
when remind me, when was Harvey?
Hurricane Harvey,
When
which
was that?
2018 or 2017.
Okay,
Something
okay,
like that.
several
It was
years.
a while ago.
Mhm.
And the point is when some utilities, especially for the larger gen sets, that are like upwards of say a megawatt or half a megawatt or something like that, big units, the producers, right? I mean, there's only so many producers. Well, let me step back for a second. There are regulatory conditions on reciprocating internal combustion engines, i.e. the RICE standards under the Clean Air Act that actually necessitate a utility having a certain emission standard. And so those tier 4 generators, it was like you weren't going to be able to get one until like 2020 or 2021. They were backlogged in production for that. So then when you add post Katrina, you add Hurricane Laura, Hurricane Ida, and other needs where people are like, hey, we need some backup generation because we keep having these kind of wide area power losses, right? That stacks things up further. And then, compound that with some of the things in California where they're having these PPP, I can't remember exactly what that stands for, but they're basically shutting down the grid to prevent wildfire stuff, right? So now you've got a huge universe of all kinds of different entities, hospitals, water utilities, etc., also coming into the market for, backup generation, right? So there's a huge demand pressure that is resulting in this kind of supply imbalance.
And an excellent point. I mean, just individuals, homeowners, backup. My parents bought one. Everyone's getting their own backup generator.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for a small utility, right? Those gen sets would be perfectly, applicable to, a small well or something like that. So
yeah. Yeah, so reminder to our audience, we're taking questions from you throughout. So just to throw a few comments and questions out. Craig says, I have ordered utility water pumps for my treatment plant last May, and I'm being told they do not know when I will see them. Lucky our old ones are still working. So yes, and I hope you continue to have them work. Kevin?
Yeah. So we haven't released it yet, but some of you may be familiar with some surveys we did early in the pandemic back in, I guess it was March, April of 2020, to just kind of get a read on what was impacting utilities. And we just completed another one that's somewhat prospective, but also retrospective. And, pipe and other infrastructure components like pumps and things appear, based on the data I'm looking at, to be the top item. And yeah, they're like computer part, like just basic computers, right? And stuff like the monitors can't get them. Remember, we just had a whole bunch of kids staying at home for almost 2 years.
Mhm.
So there was a big demand suck on that market too, along with motor vehicles, and chemicals are right in there. But and I know we're talking about that more, but the actual infrastructure stuff seems to be, and remember that's related to the chemical issue, right? Because how do we make plastic pipe? Chlorine.
Good point. When will that survey be released, or when can we see the results?
I don't know. I'm talking to my guy. I'm sending him an email right now. I'm like, hey, where
Are
can
you?
I share this? Where can I share this for real?
I love when you give us updates like that, because
Well,
always so helpful.
It's
to see
almost
where
live.
people
I just can't share yet.
Yeah.
Dale?
Just one comment to the pump, the question that the gentleman asked there, that sometimes you can be a little proactive. I don't know if you're going to do it through your engineer or yourself, but if you're looking for a XYZ brand pump and it pumps this and this and this, try to go out to other manufacturers, not to say you'll have any success, but go to someone else and say, okay, I need this head, I need that, and again, if it's in a very tight situation where you can't repipe it or anything, I totally understand. But sometimes you can adapt, and you may have to adapt, because if you have a failure, you're going to have to adapt. So I would suggest to go out to other manufacturers and say if they have something that is maybe close to fitting, and you're going to have to find a way to make it work. Just something that you could do instead of just sitting and waiting for them to supply something. I had a very similar situation with an industrial customer of ours. They needed a recirculation pump for their industrial treatment system. And what they found out was that the pump that they had was no longer made. So then they looked at it, we need this pump. Well, this was back in June, you'll have it in November. Well, they ordered it a month later, well, you're going to have it in January next year. And then they kept, so I actually got in touch with them, and we started looking around, and just so happened this industry who had another plant somewhere else had 2 pumps sitting there that they were no longer using, and they were exact ones they needed. So we said, okay, unbolt those things, get them down here. We did that. And so they actually had that and a spare, plus the new one they're still waiting for. So now they're going to have too many pumps. But you just have to get a little creative when you're against the wall. You gotta do something. I am not a patient person, so I would be out, fishing around all over the place trying to find something.
Yeah. Dean?
I just to latch on to what Dale said there. I think the key component here is, or the advice to everyone on this call, is develop your own mutual aid network, close by, statewide, East Coast, United States. Make it a stepped approach. I mean, use your associations, use your treatment plants that are around you, use the people that you've gotten to know, start to speak with them, start to make a list. I mean, they're always willing to help. That's one thing that has always impressed me about this industry, the camaraderie that everyone has had, whether it be engineers, operators, consultants, chemical suppliers, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and some people don't realize that. Yeah, Troy?
Well, it's topping what Kevin and Dean and Dale, all of them really said is the inventory. I mean, they're buying the stuff. People are panic buying. There's no doubt about it. Some people are getting stuff in, they're buying it, so they're getting way ahead of the game. And they may have, and this ties right into Dean, what he was trying to say, build your network, because they may have it. I mean, I know I talk to other distributors up and down the East Coast. Sometimes we're all trying to share stuff, and it's trying to see what we can do to help each other get out of a bind. And so that's the key. And then like I said, there's a lot of people doing panic buys. And when it comes down to stuff needs to be shipped, and then they're like telling the distributor or the manufacturer they don't need it anymore, which causes also an availability for a short period of time.
Yeah, and someone I was talking to this morning said, well, I knew there could be a shortage of chemical reagents and we need them for our testing, so I've got 6 months supply.
Yeah.
We won't have it. So if you need any, let us know. Yeah, Troy?
we just bought tires. We just bought a whole truckload of tires to cover all our big trucks to make sure we could pass every DOT inspection. So all our trucks are covered.
Interesting. Kevin?
Yeah, I'll just kind of build a real quick on what Dean said about, the mutual aid. And I can tell you, like pre chaos of COVID, there have been multiple instances where, I forget if it was DC or Columbus, Ohio, somebody needed some kind of somewhat unique coupling or something like that, left-handed smoke shifter or something like that. and so, they asked within the state, but then, I was able to push it out to all the WARN programs all over the state and on up into Canada, and just say, hey, look, does somebody have one of these things or not? And, through conversations like this, they're like, oh yeah, that guy, Troy Dressler, he's got one. And then he hooked it up through the utility and we made it happen. Right? So, it does, that whole process does make the world a little bit smaller place.
Yeah.
And can help get things done. So.
Oh my God, you're right. Yeah, just Dale, I'll get right back to you, but a couple words from our audience. David Anspatch said, we have had the unique opportunity to see a lot of each other's facilities through industry functions. I'm thinking tomorrow, Dale, you're going to be at the EPICOA event.
Yep.
And they always do plant tours, 4 times a year, plant tours. I'm like, oh my God, what a great way to get to know the people at plants in your area, see what they have, look at their inventory, just know the people, and plus all the other industry people. So EPICOA, what's EPICOA stand for, Dale?
Eastern Pennsylvania. You're gonna quiz me. Let Dean say that.
Got a black mark against me.
Yeah, Mary Kay's gonna shoot me for that. Water Pollution Control Association, Eastern Pennsylvania Water Pollution Control Association. I knew it.
Yeah, so that and so many other organizations, don't just be a member, participate. So you get to meet these people, and oh my God, the way everyone helps each other is just spectacular so often. So another comment from our audience, Mary Boggs says, I've had vendors, customer service promise us a delivery deadline before they even place the order. So they think they're getting one thing. And then once they place it, they find out through another contact with that vendor that they can't actually meet what was promised by the customer service representative. And we even I know people promising delivery at one time and then it's delayed. So Troy, what can you say about that?
That has actually happened to us a lot. We've had pipe manufacturers, like, they'll send out a delivery schedule for the upcoming week. They'll call ahead like on a Friday, and come Monday or Tuesday when that truck's supposed to actually show up, it never shows. And we're looking like idiots because we actually contacted the contractor, municipality, whatever, and then you don't know until 48 hours later that the pipe didn't show up. So you can't even give them a warning. People are putting equipment on site, getting ready to go, and then you find out that it's not showing, but it's too late.
Is there anything you can do?
The problem we always get is because of trucking. It's because of the trucks. And I know it's not on our topic, but that was one of the questions, but that's the biggest thing. That people don't want to drive from the south north. If they can take 2 loads in this, down Alabama, or drive 2 days to Pennsylvania and deliver pipe, they'll take 2 loads in Alabama every day in and out instead of coming up here.
I think you would mention, isn't there one trucking company that had lost, 300 workers or something? Do you know what the numbers were?
One manufacturer of culvert pipe they're down 400 people.
Out of how many?
Oh, I don't know. They're the largest manufacturer of that in the world, but I don't know, but 400 operators, being drivers, equipment operators in the yards, yard personnel, all that stuff to get the pipe out the door is the issue. And then they can't run enough shifts to make pipe because they don't have enough people to do it.
Okay. Dale, you had a comment?
Just a comment I had back to the last subject that Kevin was talking about. Not to say that wastewater operators are hoarders, but they like to have stuff. So it just goes back to the whole association thing that you need to know your neighbors. To Dean's point, who they are. That they may just have what you need, or something that you can use temporarily, or anything like that. So just going back to the whole reaching out to everybody and the plants that are close to you, and to your comment about visiting during tours or whatever, you get to sort of poke around, see what they got in the storage closet over there, and things like that. But today, that's your outlet. Those are the people that you have to go to because you can't get it from elsewhere.
Good point. Yeah, Dean.
I'll say this from my perspective. So none of you, like you, Christine or Dale, can be accused of doing an advertisement. But systems, use your consulting engineer. They have multiple clients. Okay, maybe of the same kind of pump or widget or whatever you need. Okay, reach out to them also. They could be an extreme help to you.
Thank you, and good point. It's we're all in this together and trying to help each other versus some other industries. It's cutthroat and they don't give a shit about anyone. It's just get their stuff done. That's why I love water and wastewater, because we've always helped each other before now, and now more than ever in these unprecedented times. Troy?
Well, they're talking like the same thing as Dean. Like, a lot of people did what they were taught. They follow exactly what someone else before them taught them. They're not expanding their outlook and going to look on the internet, go to some of these trade shows and see what else is there. Which other type of widget is the same thing, or asking questions. And They just want to stay with the same red pump I've had for 20 years. That's what I want, no matter what.
Yeah, they're gonna have to look for options. Yeah, actually on Davies Hood, my buddy from Indron Coatings, he says, are engineers and owners allowing change orders related to drastic changing the material cost on jobs, or just can't get certain materials? How are alternate materials being used because of these different shortages? So I know just today, Rob Horvat from our Pittsburgh office said they were going to build this little building just to store chemicals out of steel. Can't get steel. So the contractor said, we'll use CMUs, we'll use masonry. And they're like, sure, it'll look pretty. We don't really need that, but they made that change. So are you guys seeing changes in other equipments, having to change what you normally use versus what's available, like Troy had said? Anyone seeing that out there for clients, or that being a solution? Yeah, Dale?
I think where you may get in a pickle on that kind of stuff is if it's a job that's bid and there's, you need this pump, this fan, this widget, and it's specified in there what it is. So you're basically against the wall, but then again, you could always go back to your engineer and you could but again, that all has cost involved. So you have to go back to your engineer. They have to take this other widget that doesn't look like that one and make it fit. And they don't always just go in there. You might have to change the size of the building. You might have to, who knows what. So it becomes quite complicated when you're doing a large project because all those things are made to fit together. So when you change one thing, it's not going to all fit, and it really throws things off. Not to say that it can't be done, but there's money there. If the money isn't as important as the time, I guess that's how you have to look at it. To say, okay, I can't wait a year, but I can spend $10,000 to re-engineer this to use something different, then let's do that.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things when it comes to putting a whole package together but then now I'm talking about an upgrade, not just a single piece of equipment.
Right.
But if you're doing a lot of stuff that's all made to fit together and it's really hard to change one piece, it's like taking the puzzle and cutting a piece with the scissors to make it fit. It doesn't always work.
Exactly. Kevin, you would comment? Do you remember? Okay. Troy?
Well, and also to Dale's point, you can't you can't go from a ductile job to a PVC job because you can't, because the PVC people are behind, the ductile people are behind. So you can't just re-engineer it to a different line. Even though it might work, you just can't do it. They're the same outside diameters, things like that, but it's not available. And they're shipping, telling us 6 to 9 months for ductile, saying, PVC, they're still shipping stuff from May and June to us now, and it's November. So, it's just that you can't move it. You can't do it with HDPE pipe because they get further behind. So it's a whole, and there's no really substitution right now.
Okay. So back to what we had mentioned with Dean suggesting reach out to your consultants and engineers. Rob Horvat just chimed in. He said, great point. He loves having the chance to make a few calls to his client network. And we love putting people together, people who can help each other and maybe don't know each other until now. And another question for you, Troy. Pat Burke from our office is asking, hey, are you seeing material availabilities from your suppliers improving at all? Any progress? Hoping things are slowly coming back to normal, and you're shaking your head no. So give us honesty. That I like.
No, I mean, we're here in 16, 18 weeks on like fire hydrants and like valves are 12 to 14 weeks. Then they're not calculated in the holiday season. So you might as well add 2 more weeks into things, 2 to 4 more weeks into everything because it's out there, and they're making everything as fast as they can go. There's so many different sizes and types of pipe. So they'll run for 5 days this type of pipe, then you have to switch over so they can keep keeping up with other orders. So if you're in that, say they're making 10,000 feet of pipe and you're 11,000, but they're only gonna run to 10,000, then you're waiting another 30, 40 days until you come back around to run your pipe again. And it's just that whole process.
Dale?
I just wanted to ask a question to Troy. Are you seeing prices change midstream?
Yes, we are getting a lot of repricings right now. Like we're basically held hostage. We'll get a truckload of pipe. This is going to ship next week. it needs to change. Like PVCs and block pricing is how it's priced. So they'll tell you need to change the block 300, 310, or whatever it may be. And just to give you an idea where the PVC market has gone since October of 20 and to now, it has gone from like block 75 back over a year ago, to now it's block 400 this month.
Wait, what does that mean?
Well, that's the pricing. So like 8-inch SDR 35 for people in the room. Last year in August, it was like $273 a foot. Now it's $940 a foot for the same pipe. If you had a project that was bid last year and you had 1,000 feet on this, imagine you're adding $7 more a foot to that, and then everything else to that pipe.
And you can't get it.
Yep.
Dean?
For the purposes of everyone on this call, I think it's a large wake up to hear that. Okay. And I think it may be an obligation of most of us on this call to make sure that your authority or your council or that they are aware of this stuff, because they don't want to get surprises of, okay, that stick of pipe that I just ordered, I used to pay this and now it's 3 times as much. And they'll come back and ask you why you didn't tell them. But it's just kind of like a heads up, and make sure that your boards and your councils and things like that are aware of some of these things.
Yeah, and especially we're at the end of the year, so often people are planning for next year, 2022. You've got to know this. Prices are way, way up for so many things you normally would get by, and so make sure you're budgeting accordingly or looking at rate increases to pay for all this stuff. Critical to be aware and plan for it. So a reminder to our audience, we're taking questions from you guys through the Q&A button. So a couple comments from our audience. Todd Kaufman, who just joined Entech a couple weeks ago, he says, depending on the nature of a project and equipment, it may be an option for the municipality to pre-purchase or place an order before the bid is awarded to the contractor. The winning contractor will only place an order after awarded the bid, shop submittal is approved, etc. This may save several weeks or months on the overall length of the project. And I know AWWA Pennsylvania was looking at that on the wastewater side, and they were looking at the generators, struggling to get generators. They were going to buy one now, knowing construction's 9 months out, but they could pre-purchase it. So any of you guys seeing clients do that? Dale?
Yeah, just talking to Kim Mazer from our office and a local client here, they're installing a generator and they're doing the same thing. And what they decided to do was to pre-purchase the generator so that they could get it in a timely manner and not to wait to go through the whole bidding process, so forth and so on, which is another point I wanted to make earlier. What they did, what we helped them do was they developed a spec. They went out to 4 generator manufacturers, got prices, the least expensive one, boom, that's the one going. And it just so happened that the least expensive one was like a 3-month delivery time, and everyone else was 16 months. Now that just what I'm getting at goes back to what I said before, that don't do tunnel vision on I want brand XYZ. Look around. There's apparently, like, I was shocked when he told me that one of these manufacturers, now that they just so happen to have one sitting there, maybe, but they were able to get it in a third of the time that was told by 3 other manufacturers. So you got to broaden your horizons. Like, you got to look out, say, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to get that particular one, but maybe this one or this one or this one. And he was just telling me that this morning, and I figured I'd share it. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Okay. Yeah, Troy?
Well, you might not be able to pre-purchase, but what you can do is like get it approved ASAP, make sure that, get the submittals approved and get it ordered. Then that puts you in queue with the manufacturer to get it done. So if it's not going to go for 6 months, maybe we'll get it in 4 months from now, or, a little bit earlier. But the sooner you can get it in line of production, the better off we're going to be. And there's some, we're hearing some things that are saying they're going to be out to 2023 till they come back around. But that's the key.
2023. That's over a year away.
Yeah.
So another question from our audience. This is from Sean Arbaugh, who says, have regulators allowed additional time and/or discretion in your experience with the delays that we're seeing? So I guess delays in getting projects wrapped up, getting stuff online. Steve, can you speak to that at all?
Unfortunately, not really. That's a bit outside of my wheelhouse, but I did hear on a WARN call yesterday about, delay in project completion causing issues with grant awards. So I think some others on the panel might be able to fill in some gaps on that question.
Yeah. So I'm just going to I'll pile on that and then add to something that I think Troy was talking. So we have seen even pre-COVID, in just terms of the cycle of, say, and I'll use the generator example for a utility for a FEMA grant, for emergency power or something like that, is that the turnaround time and the performance between the time you're awarded, the time you go out and do all your bidding and all that jazz, and then, the availability of the product, right? And you've got a 2-year window that it's got to be done.
Mhm.
It doesn't comport. So the supply chain issue will compound that performance period. And in this case, this particularly ended up having given, $1 million back to FEMA because they couldn't do it. And they, that doesn't cover the time they spent. I'll just say, as pleased as I am about the funds that have been appropriated in the recent infrastructure bill, that is a significant pile of money that is going to go into the economy, right? Creating demand for
Are you
all kinds
thinking-
of stuff across all
Oh.
kinds of infrastructure. And so whatever you're experiencing now, it is going to force multiply by the kajabillions because of the amount of money. So, just kind of think into that, right? We've got the ARPA money that's already on the street, the piles of money that they just approved here on Monday. Some of it will come through EPA or other channels. That's going to take a little time to kind of uncork and process, but utilities should really be thinking about it to do the things they need to do. But in terms of these supply chain issues, that's going to add some additional pressure on into 2023, I think, as Troy noted. So just, kajabillions.
Yeah.
I don't know where I came up with that.
And Kevin, I've been thinking the same thing. All this money is out there, so now you can do upgrades, you can build things. You
Can't get the stuff.
So yeah, I've been thinking the same
Doesn't
thing.
mean you shouldn't try to do it. I'm just, you got to work that into the plan, right?
Well, it's just like the way we've normally done things can't be done now. We've got to be more creative and do it. And that's why we're doing these roundtables. I see us doing another one in 6 months.
Yeah.
Where are things
And
at that point?
there do seem to be some interesting, I'll just call them manipulations of the market ongoing. And I'm not going to name any names, but
Okay.
it's creating additional forced pressure on the
Mm-hmm.
system.
Okay. Dean, did you have a comment?
Yeah, my comment is that's kind of my next concern as an operator goes, that when you can't get that pump, okay, when you can't get that chemical, maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, okay, and you can't find it anywhere else, and you start to go into violation. What's the regulatory agency going to say then? What are they going to do? Are they thinking about that? That's the next step that could be coming very, very soon.
Yeah, I've been thinking that too. Okay. Sort of a shift for the questioning. Several comments have come in regards to chemicals. So Carol Paul out in Greenville, she mentions we're experiencing partial shipments for chemicals. Nick O'Halloran from our Pittsburgh office, he says, I've been seeing delays in complete shipments of every chemical from chlorine, pot perm, coagulant, etc. And then Carol Paul, also from Greenville, says, our engineer suggested getting an emergency permit to feed liquid chlorine instead of gas. It was initially going to be an emergency permit, but after some thought, we decided to make it a permit modification. That way, we can switch feeds anytime we need them. Great job, Entech. Yeah, she's our client. Thank you, Carol. This is all great ideas. Make changes that you have control over making, but also think long-term. To have that option seems to be invaluable. Any of you guys seeing things like this, Dale?
Just a word to Carol there, the operator ingenuity. That they probably had gaseous chlorine one time and switched to hyperchloride and say, hey, we can still do that and go back. We can get that and go back and do it. So just a comment about thinking outside the box.
Yeah, excellent. Steve?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to two items brought up. The first being the partial deliveries.
Yeah.
We've been seeing that across the board, and we do understand that it's frustrating, but when we speak with the repackagers, what they're attempting to do, because they're getting pinched too, they're either getting pinched from their suppliers or they're having issues with transportation. We've seen rail car deliveries of liquefied chlorine be a real issue. They'll be prepared to receive a couple rail cars of chlorine that they can offload and repackage and get to their water customers. But when those are late or delayed, that cascades down. And what these repackagers will attempt to do, and I think they're doing this in good faith, at least that's been our experience to date, they're just trying to keep everybody operating. So you may not be at 4 weeks supply, you may be at 2 weeks supply, but they seem to understand where their customers are at and sort of what their margin is. And they attempt to work within those margins to keep everybody supplied at some level so nobody has to go on a boil order or is in risk of violating a permit. The second piece related to this contingency planning idea, I applaud that. That's just tremendous to hear that they're getting a permit modification so that they can switch between gaseous and sodium hypochlorite. That's an excellent idea. And one of the shortages we saw that was regional earlier this year was ferric chloride. And what saved many water systems of having a real challenge in continuing to operate is that they had already pre-tested, pre-evaluated alternate coagulants. They had worked with their primacy agency ahead of time to make sure that they could make that switch and everybody was comfortable with it. And so when ferric chloride was unavailable, their suppliers said, well, we can keep you going with ferric sulfate or aluminum chlorohydrate or or whatever. And they were able to make that switch seamlessly. So to the extent that systems have the ability to do that kind of contingency planning, get some flexibility in their operating permits to allow them to switch under these, a supply chain disruption, they'll just be in a much more resilient place, much better able to handle these. I don't want to call them hiccups because that's an understatement. These problems that we're likely to continue to see for at least the next, I'm guessing the next 6 months, if not longer, depending on, how other things shake out, like the issues Kevin has alluded to.
Yeah, you use the word resiliency, it's having those options. And so often people just keep doing things the same way. So to have options really can be helpful here. So I want to pause for just a moment, and my panel doesn't know this is coming right now. Well, actually, two of them will know, but I'm going to share my screen because we're going to play a little game right now that I'm calling Predicting the Future. So I need you to all gaze into your crystal balls, and the question I'm posing to my panel is, when will the supply chain issues be resolved?
Which ones?
So it's interesting. We've all been sort of ducking around it, but I'm going to poll my expert panel right now and see from all of you, and we'll also poll our audience and see what they have to say. So Dale, gaze into the crystal ball. And what are you seeing, Dale? What do you think?
By looking into the crystal ball and going back to what Kevin had mentioned about the Infrastructure Act, money becoming available where we're already in a situation, to me, it's only going to get worse in my crystal ball. It's going to get really bad in the next year or two, although it's already really bad. So I'm not exactly if that means really, really bad or how you say that, but I don't see this getting better for 2 to 3 years. is what I see, because this infrastructure money isn't just going to come pouring out the gates like next week.
Right.
So let's just say it's not 6-8 months till you see any of that. Well, we're already past that 6-8 month on the problems we're having now, and that's just going to compound it after that. So looking in the crystal ball, I'm going to say 2 to 3 years.
2 to 3. Okay, Kevin, what do you think?
I'd second that motion.
Okay.
I think, you know, some of this is kind of self-induced by offshoring of various production, right? And we're not going to change that anytime quick, right? The other piece that's a big variable here, and I think somebody alluded to it, you know, there was a driver shortage before the pandemic. Okay, this isn't a pandemic induced thing. There was a shortage before that compounded it, and I think Dale was talking about it, but or maybe it was Troy, you know, long haul, right? I mean, you know, during especially the early phases of COVID, you know, those people are like, I'm not going to do that. They dropped out of the market and either said, hey, I can go work on this highway project and come home every night. I'm not going to drive from Alabama up to Pennsylvania or wherever. So between that kind of workforce issue and then a similar kind of, you know, backlog in the rail transportation, which is to some partially workforce related. Yeah, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, I read something about we're short 70,000 truck drivers, 70,000. And if it's hazardous chemicals, even harder to find someone. And the next 10 years, it's going to double. So
right. I mean, that was part of the issue with the, and it wasn't necessarily in Pennsylvania, but, you know, we had a real liquid oxygen kind of craziness in Florida because of a real spike in hospital use. It's like a 500% increase in hospital use of oxygen. Well, you know, not only do you have to have CDL and a hazmat, but now you have to have cryogenic credentials, right? There's not a whole lot of those guys hanging around or gals hanging around. So, you know, it just kind of built upon itself. So I think it's going to take a while to uncork, and, you know, as good for, you know, long-term kind of infrastructure renewal that these funds have, it will exacerbate the supply chain issue for a couple of years to come.
okay, Troy, give us your best guess.
I'm saying 2 to 3 years, but you know, if we almost have to have a little industrial revolution in a way and get people back to work and working 2 to 3, you know, third shift, you know, a third shift in, but we're not many people working in manufacturing plants. So until we get more people working there to help bring back up production, it's going to keep being pushed out.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, some people are running, you know, 6 days a week, but they're only running one shift because they can't have enough people to run 2 shifts.
Right. Okay. Okay. I'm going to throw up this poll, the same question before I finish with the panel, throw this poll out to the audience. So, so when will this end? I see. When I came up with these numbers, apparently I was being really optimistic. 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, never. What do I look like? Karnak the Magnificent? Any of you seasoned veterans may recognize Karnak from Johnny Carson's show. So wrap up with my panel. Steve, give us your best estimate. When will this end?
Yeah, so I have maybe a hybrid response. On the positive side, I think that the current, and this is you know, completely a swag, the current crisis might pass within 18 years, but I think that supply chain disruptions are going to be with us in some of, you know, various magnitudes forever. I mean, we're always going to have hurricanes or a confluence of equipment failures, you know, rail bridges being burnt down by wildfires that are going to cause disruptions. I think that the solution is going to be a change in the way we do business. And one thing that may help, and I'm not an expert on this at all, but I was speaking with someone who has a lot of experience and has thought about this, the movement to driverless vehicles. And so if we can move to that technology and embrace it, and use that maybe for commodity or, you know, consumer goods deliveries. I don't think we'll ever put hazardous chemicals in a driverless truck. I just not going to do it. But then that preserves that limited pool of drivers for that specialized need to move hazardous materials back and forth. So maybe that's wishful thinking, but with this, it sort of folds in with some of the work that we have to do to address climate resilience and the climate problem. So, maybe we can build off of what's going to happen there with electric trucks, self-driving trucks that will alleviate and take pressure off the transportation sector. And the other thing that I think is maybe a silver lining of everything that's happened in the past couple years is that we're now much more acutely aware of the vulnerabilities in supply chains. And I still have some faith in humanity that we're smart enough to learn from those. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I do hope that. I hope we can learn from this and build some resilience back into this just-in-time inventory model that leaves us, essentially with our pants down when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steve, you said 18 years. Did you mean 18 months?
Oh, 18 months. 18 months.
Yeah.
I was like, man, he's being very doomsday.
No,
18 months.
yeah, and speaking of something Zach Martin had mentioned when I saw him at a conference a couple of months ago is back in the day, suppliers and even utilities, they had extra. They had tons of inventory. That was the thing, like no big deal. But with just-in-time manufacturing, there is no inventory because that's money sitting on your floor that you're not making. And so now it's almost like utilities have to be the ones considering what's my supply, what's my inventory, and using your neighbors as well. Dean, you're the last one to guess. So what do you think as far as the when will this end?
Well, if you're looking for a number, I'll say 5 years. But I will tell you this: I'm not convinced that it's really ever going to be solved. It's going to be an ever evolving kind of thing. And one of the reasons I say that, the first question I ask myself, well, if there isn't 3 lines of manufacturing going on, where'd everybody go? Where did they go? Who do you call to get them back? Okay. And secondly, I'll say that might contradict that a little bit. I'm from Eastern Pennsylvania. I drive I-78 and I-81 almost every day. Okay. No one can tell me there's a shortage of trucks on those interstates. Okay. If we get the people back to drive the trucks, they're not going to be able to move. So then we got to build more roads. Then we got to build bigger roads, then bridges. And I mean, I'm just not sure. I think we may have to change the way we do things.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Okay. I'm going to end the poll from our audience. So let's see what they had to say. So it looks like they're guessing in line with many of our panelists with 2 years there, although 8 different people are like, what the hell? Do I look like Karnak Magnificent? So thank you very much to our audience for giving us your 2 cents. And I always have fun coming up with these, game show questions. And this one just really had me thinking and wondering. And I have a feeling you could be right on target there, Dean. We're going to have to change the way we do things. So. Dale, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to get back to what Steve was saying there about the just-in-time delivery. Again, as also goes into what Dean said. So, okay, we have just-in-time delivery. Well, if there's nothing to deliver, they have now moved the inventory problem from the supplier to the user. So the person that needs 1,000 feet of pipe, okay, they can no longer get it. So now what do they have to do? They have to stock 1,000 feet of pipe because the manufacturer isn't going to do it, because right here drives everything, money, and they're not going to carry it. So now the end user or client has to have their own inventory to offset what is not carried by somebody else. And to Dean's comment, that could be how we're changing how business is done. I don't like it. I don't agree with it, but I think that's what's going to have to happen. So, you're going to have it because you're not going to be able to get it. So, let's in your long range plans, you're looking at a water main project 2 years down the road. I need 10,000 feet of pipe. Well, before that, in at least a year, you better start looking, and you better be getting it to have it sitting there so that when this job comes up, the contractor who also can't get it you're going to say, okay, I need this job done. I have the pipe. What are you going to charge me to put it in? And that's what I see, because back in another life, I was a parts guy. And I worked in a place where we stocked parts. And as time went on, we stocked less and less and less and less because it cost money to stock parts. So then what I saw there were the truckers or whatever, they were buying things and putting them on the shelf. This is 25 years ago, you know, so that they had stuff. Now it's just getting moved here.
Yeah,
That's
well, and it's
my
actually,
thoughts.
as you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, actually, every municipality doesn't need to do their own. It's almost like each community, each what are they called? The counties, each county or someone needs to lead this resistance where we can have these hubs where
Yeah,
there's supplies like that available.
Or you split it up and say, you know, this town, you keep pipe, you keep valves, you keep this, and then we all work together. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, and actually, one thing Chip Bilger from Western Berks mentioned this morning is buying chemicals. He actually gets bulk contracts, buys chemicals for 9 other systems. They all pool they get better pricing by buying in bulk. Pricing went up, but I was like, oh, we could do the same thing with materials as well. So get better pricing, but also have that at inventory and supplies available. Troy, you to comment?
Well, yeah, because some of the stuff is inventory. I mean, there's one time, like us as a distributor, we're going to have it. Our competitor on the street might have it, or we might be out of it. And so, and I hate to say you have to go look around, but you have to look around sometimes. And I hope you always come back to us in the end. But it's just one of the things is one minute we have it when we're out, and then and like talking about like your big jobs, if you lay it out in what you need in sections instead of like if you have a 10,000 foot job and you say I need all my pipe today, it's not going to happen. But if you say I need 1,000 feet of pipe by December or January, they can start. It gives it increments you can work with, you know. But if you say I want all of it right now, and it goes back to Steve's part about like chemicals too, about they're giving what they need to get through. It's the same thing. We have to divvy it out to how we can get everybody through the jobs or manufacturers, how they can get it to everybody.
Okay, Steve, did you have a comment?
Always just a thumbs up on the idea of forming some sort of consortium to increase your buying power in your inventory. Just a quick aside, we've been working with small systems who are uniquely challenged when it comes to these chemical supply shortages. They like just take bleach as an example. They're getting small containerized packages of bleach, which is lowest on the food chain in the supply line. So that's going to be the first to go into shortage. You're going to be in a much better position if you're getting it from a repackager like Univar, Thatcher, JCI Jones, one of those big companies. They're going to find a way to maintain their supply. So what we've been discussing with some small systems is could you unite in some way and get bulk delivery of chemical and somehow divvy it up? Now, it's complicated by what happens with NSF certification when you remove it from the container it was delivered in to another container and take it back to the system for use. But I think we can figure that one out. That's not an insurmountable problem. But this idea of sort of working together to increase your inventory, your collective inventory and your buying power, I think is a good strategy, especially for small systems.
Well, and it's more attractive to the supplier too, right? So now instead of having 15 deliveries of 1 gallon, right? Just to be, for example, I can give it all to one group and serve as many. And, you know, I was just in an email exchange with a group of utilities out in California that, you know, there are some various kind of procurement cooperatives, if you will, and it's not without its own kind of, you know, contracting challenges. But you know, to this point, one of the things, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, I think in some of our conversations, what we've sort of observed, especially with smaller systems, is they're not necessarily on a fixed contract with a service provider, right? So they don't have, so they're basically essentially going out in the spot market on an as need basis. And if that's the case, and some of that's because of fluctuation of use and all that, and I get it, but they are the lowest priority customer, right? They're going to go to the contract customers first. And it's like, hey, well, Kevin just needs this. and maybe I come back into ask something again in 6-8 months, I'm not going to get priority delivery. And so if you, between being a contracted customer and maybe being part of a collective, that's probably one way to deal with some of the commodities that we're having trouble with now.
Dean, do you know of any collectives here in Pennsylvania in the area that share supplies, share inventory like that?
Not many more than you've already brought up. But you know, it's interesting to hear the comment that Dale made, on the shelf. On the shelf. Remember, not too long ago, okay, many manufacturers and suppliers had all kinds of stuff on the shelf. Okay, now in the past few years, there hasn't been many things on the shelf. Okay, is the pendulum going to have to swing again back to that, or somewhere in between? Again, going to have to change your way of doing things.
Yeah, yeah. So good question from our audience. Nick Cirilli asked, has anyone on the panel experienced any better delivery times by paying a premium for shipments? If so, hey, what can you get if you have a little extra cash? So Troy, what can we get if we want to pay a little more?
I'm sure you could get, if you want to pay a higher price to the manufacturer and put yourself in line, I'm sure they would move you up one way or another. But that's, I mean, I feel like they're already taking advantage of the situation already. So let alone that's more of a situation to take advantage of. But
Steve, you had a comment?
Yeah, I haven't seen individual water systems take that tact, but I have seen repackagers take that tact with the railroads. So they can pay a premium for expedited rail transport and priority offload. It's expensive though. I mean, it really cuts in. Either they're going to have to raise their price, or it cuts deeply into their bottom line. So sort of looping back to the whole transportation issue being a challenge, but you can kind of buy your way a little bit out of that problem. It's just not cheap.
Okay, Troy?
the biggest thing I've seen too is people wanting to buy. We said about load manufactured down to Alabama shipping ductile pipe. That supplier, that trucker would be like, all right, I'll take that load for this much. Then he'll call up the end user and be like, if you want it, it's $1,500 more. So they already signed on to take the load from one, and they'll call us and say it's another $1,500 to take it up. But I know, like, back to the consortium stuff too, I want to bring this one up too. Like the Dean and you guys were talking about is like a lot of people have been helping each other out by like letting us like either give us inventory back to sell to them to help distribute around the whole industry and area, just because they need a lot of it. You might need a couple items here or there, but they've been quick. Like, I'm not putting these items in right now. I have these 500 items on the shelf. I'm not going to put them in into next year. All right, these other guys down the street need a little bit of help. They've been helping work back and forth with that too. So distribute to help everybody out and keep them all working. So it's been good. And that goes back to like really knowing what everybody has.
Mm-hmm. Dale?
Just back to the question. I have not heard of anyone paying more to get a delivery, as Troy was just talking about. But what I have heard through the whole trucking industry is that, you know, you have Joe, he lives in Florida, and you have a load for him to go to Pennsylvania, and there's 4 loads that got to go out. Which one do you think he's going to take? The one that's going to pay the best. So if he can go to Georgia and make what he was going to get paid to go to Pennsylvania, where do you think he's going to go? From Florida, he's going to go to Georgia. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what's compounding the driver situation. Again, I don't want to get into that whole thing, but you know, and I got to say, if it was me, I'd do the same thing. You know, if you're going to pay me $1,000 to go 500 miles and you're going to pay me $1,000 to go 2,000 miles, what am I going to do? I'm going to go because they had the ability to refuse those other loads because there's so much work out there. They don't have to worry about getting a load. Before, it was almost like oversupply. So you're waiting to get a load, and boy, one comes up, you're just going to take it. But if there's 6 there and you get to pick, you're going to pick the easy one that you're going to make money on. Okay. And just one other real quick comment. I don't want to get off the rails here, but as we talk about supply chain and these kind of things about buying quantities of things, Doesn't it sound like Walmart? Just think about it. Doesn't it sound like Walmart? What did Walmart do? They got first priority on all deliveries because they buy the most. And what did they do by doing that? They put everybody else out of business. And it's just think about it, and then I'll shut up. But think
Okay,
about
so a reminder to our audience, we're taking questions from you through the Q&A. And here's something, one of the manufacturers, Casco, mentions that they do submersible mixers and aerators. They're seeing delivery in 2022 or later. So they mentioned that they're currently at 2-week delivery, but it's moved from a 5-week delivery from the summer. I'm not quite sure what that means. So another question from our audience, which I really thought was interesting, and this is from John Bunch. Hey, John, client out there in Warwick. We're redoing a tank for him right now. So he asked, how are the manufacturers faring? Are there some of them in danger of going out of business? I keep thinking, if you don't have product to get to your customers, you can't make any money. So have you guys been hearing of any suppliers going out of business, or are all of them booming with this huge backlog? What are you guys hearing and seeing? Yes, Steve.
I can start on the chemical side with a couple of observations. So Kevin alluded to this earlier. There are, I think, a very small minority of companies, one in particular, that is taking capacity off the market to essentially force prices upward. So we are seeing that for one of the major commodities. On the other hand, again, the folks in the middle, the repackagers, they in some cases are getting squeezed. And they're getting squeezed because their suppliers are charging them significantly higher prices for the product. And they are contracted with customers, and they're trying to do, in some cases, they're trying to do the best that they can to honor those contracts, but that may mean they're operating at least temporarily at a loss. Or the other option they have is to execute force majeure or try to ask or negotiate with their customers for a price increase. So I think I don't know if they're at risk of going out of business, but I do think the middle of the supply chain, these repackagers some of them are in a difficult spot and probably will be through 2022.
Okay. Anyone else hearing any rumblings out there? Anyone going out of business or struggling?
Yeah,
Sure,
not from the manufacturer.
I'm sorry, what was that, Kevin?
I was not from the manufacturing side. And I think on that point, we're seeing in various places, price increases of upwards 100, 150%, or that have been executed through force majeure because it's a pass through, right? And so, or part of the price change is a premium on transportation, right? So we saw this in, Steve and I worked on this issue down in Florida with CO2 last year. They weren't able to source it locally because of a manufacturer closed down operations. And so they had to go up into Tennessee and further afield. So the transportation cost was exceptionally double. And so they just passed that through. So utilities should really plan on whatever their current kind of commodities budget is. You're going to see, if you haven't already seen, probably some significant kind of doubling on average of some of those products.
Yeah. We've just got a couple minutes left. So one thing we haven't really talked in detail. So are there any recommendations you can give to our audience in regards to when you're budgeting a job and you have a certain number in mind, and now you go to bid it and it's 3 times the expense or double, and you just don't have that money in the budget? And also, suppliers can't hold their prices more than 4 days. What have we seen clients, what are utilities doing to get past this problem right now? Dean, any suggestions?
That's one that I haven't, frankly, been too involved in from that perspective. I do believe that would probably be something more like from an engineering perspective. I see a big shake of the head there by Christine. What do you do when you're in that situation? I mean, That's a tough one. I'm actually anxious to hear some feedback on that.
Yeah, and actually, Rob Horvat had, I brought this up a little earlier. We over budgeted. We were getting a grant, wanted to make sure we had enough money. So we asked for like $3 million. Bids come in, it's 2 million. So it sucks because we lose $1 million in funding that we now can't spend because it wasn't part of the project. But the other thing that I think a lot of people are dealing with because they hadn't expected these big price increases. Dale, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was going to defer to Troy here about how do you handle that when, like you said, somebody was scheduled for 10,000 feet of pipe, told them it was $1 a foot, now it's $6 a foot.
Yeah.
I know they're going to scream and stomp their feet, but in the end, what do you really do?
I mean, right now, the best thing to do is we talked about is communication, is getting all letters out to everybody as soon as we're getting price increase letters all the time. There's one guy that's in our office. That's all he does is price increases. I mean, it drives him. I mean, without him, I think we'd be upside down because he keeps changing all the time. But, and it has to be, I guess from our side of it, we want to see from an engineer side, it would be, give us dates like boom, 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 real quick. I mean, no one can really drag their feet on, I don't want to say dragging their feet, but no one can really, they have to work on the submittals real quick and get it approved and back so everything can get ordered. I mean, the faster you get it in the supply chain, help everybody out. That's the biggest thing. I mean, because there's so many times that's delayed. I know we had one guy wanted it by March 1st, all the stuff, and then he had 60 days to award if they wanted to. I'm like, so we won't bid it if you wait 60 days. We're not going to bid it. But if you give it to us and if you have 10 days to decide if you're going to go with it, then we can bid it. But other than that, we're not going to do it because we couldn't.
Okay. Kevin, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think part of what we've seen in some of this, a little bit was sort of related to supply during COVID is, basically some of these projects get scaled back. So if I was going to do whatever, 2 miles of pipe, well, now I'm only going to do a half mile pipe.
Got it.
Or I'm not going to do any of that stuff because I got to pay for my chlorine and just the basic stuff to keep the water clean and safe. So I think there's going to be this real tug of war on deferred maintenance and stuff to sustain, especially in a tighter margin, utility budget, right? So something's going to have to come off the table.
Yeah, and it's hard because we already know our utilities are underfunded as it is. How can you delay maintenance on stuff anymore? So to wrap things up, want to say thank you to our audience. If you enjoyed today's roundtable, we have another one scheduled on December 2nd on fog, and also looking to schedule one later in December. Have a beer with an engineer. Nobody's perfect. See what we did there? Nobody's perfect. So
no water, no beer.
entecheng.com. Across the top menu, you'll find resources. And the drop-down menu will have roundtables there. So that tells you about upcoming roundtables as well as recordings of all of our past roundtables. Huge thank you to my panel. Dale Miller, returning, this may be his 6th one. Phenomenal. I love having you on our panels. Zach wasn't able to join us, but Kevin Morley with AWWA, Steve Allgeier with the EPA, Troy Dressler with Wastewater, and Dean Miller with Miller Environmental. So I'll leave this up here for just a moment. And if you want PDH certificates or operator CEHs, please send me an email. And I'll be sure to get those out to you. So to wrap things up with my panel, Dale, any final words of wisdom for our audience?
No, I guess all I'll say is you got to think outside the box today to make it work.
Yeah,
That's my comment.
Good advice. Kevin, any last words, Kevin?
Folks are just going to need to be flexible and patient and prepared to adapt. Be resilient, basically.
Troy, any last words?
I think Kevin took what I was going to say, but basically have fun and do what you can with what you have.
Have fun?
Yeah, look at it the one way. You can't let it beat you up because otherwise it's.
I like that. You're right. Steve, any final words for our audience?
Yeah, just don't let all this pain go to waste. Let's try to learn some lessons from this and see if we can work together to improve outcomes when this happens again, because we know it's going to happen again.
Yeah. And Dean, any final words of wisdom?
Reach out to your old friends and make new friends.
Oh, I like it.
Nice.
Big thank you to all my panelists. You were all phenomenal. Thank you to our audience. Great questions. And I always end these by saying magical things happen when you bring together passionate people. So thank you all for sharing your passion with our industry. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Christine.
Thanks, Christine.